Who's coming? Same old tired fairies you've seen around since day one.
This is gonna be fun.
I couldn't care less what people do as long as they don't do it in public.
No, it's the delivery boy from the bakery. Ask him if he's got any hot cross buns.
Because you'd played these characters on Broadway before, did that make it easy to just slip back into them when you came to film?
I don't know if I'd say it was easy, but it was a pleasure, and it was a deeper pleasure than I expected it would be. I had never done anything, I had never worked on a piece as an actor where I and everybody I was working with came in with such a shorthand already and so much history with the roles and the story. And it was a deeper experience in that, fuller experience in that way than I'd ever experienced before. So it was a pleasure.
Incredibly unique and incredibly rewarding to have the opportunity to revisit a character that I spent months exploring and immersing myself in. Yeah, it was really special. And to do it with the original company, all of us reuniting and reprising our roles, there was such a creative shorthand and a trust and a familiarity with one another and with this world that was just delightful to rediscover.
Well, I wish I could roles on film that I've done a Broadway production of beforehand, because it does give you such an amazing opportunity to explore the character and flesh it out night to night with an audience and that feedback from an audience. So I found it very positive. I think the challenge was being willing to check things that worked on stage and come at it with beginner's mind and fresh eyes, still knowing who that character was, but being willing to surprise yourself and modulate things and collaborate with a great director like Joe Mantello on finding new things. I'm so grateful that Joe was open to that. So the whole process felt very fluid for me. It didn't feel like rigid. It felt like a fluid extension of what we'd done on stage.
It's an all-gay cast, which nowadays is still the exception rather than the rule. Does that change how it feels on set?
It's more fun. I mean, there's a shorthand, there's an understanding, and there's just something, I feel like there's a compassion and an empathy that starts from the beginning, where even if you don't know somebody's story exactly, we all come from a similar place of having to go through this this time in our life that was difficult and getting through it on the other side. So I just think it was, starting out, there was a sense of understanding and sort of brotherhood really among the group of guys. And it lasted from the first rehearsal of the play to the end of the film. That was really a wonderful thing.
Well, I think it made it easier at the very beginning, from the first table read to the first rehearsals before we were on stage, just because there was, everybody could kind of drop any guards up or any kind of modulation about how to be in a room with one another. A lot of us knew one another before this got started, but we certainly knew of one another. And there was just this immediate sense of a shared experience, and in that, an immediate sense of freedom and comfort. And so, you know, getting to do that run in New York, by the time we got to LA to do the film a year later, it was just about having fun, working hard and you know, trying to tell the story as best we could, but really enjoying the sense of freedom and accomplishment and pride for one another, that we were all in the process of making something.
Oh, we had shorthand with each other. Things were a little loosey-goosey.
I felt like it completely informed our ensemble and our sense of purpose and our sense of wanting to roll up our sleeves and get to work and telling Mark's story in the most truthful way that we could, and our comfortability together. And I don't know, I loved it. I wouldn't change it for the world.
I was quite surprised in some of the language in the play, because there's some quite transgressive language in there that would shock audiences nowadays. Is it because you had all worked together before? Does it make it easier or more comfortable to say that kind of stuff? So I can't imagine it's pleasant necessarily to say out loud.
No, but when you consider that it's a play set in 1968, you have to honor the time period, you have to honor the social mores of the time. And this was when Dr. King, I mean, I've always loved that when we did the Broadway production, the opening night was April 14th, 1968, which was 10 days after Dr. King's assassination. So when you think about the heat, the racial heat of this country at the time, and the playwright being able to put a Black man on this stage and not run from the fact that he's Black and not run from those facts, made it difficult, but it also made it worth playing. So with these gentlemen, who I know are so well trained and such kind, generous spirits, that part made it easier, but I did have to go into the uncomfortability of it just to play the character.
It's certainly not nice, but I think it's important because it's a reflection of where society was at that time, which was not that long ago. And so I think as a bellwether for how far we've come and how much we've integrated ideas of respect and inclusivity, I think that we can't shy away from it. And I think that it characterizes this as a real period piece in the truest sense, right? Because yeah, some of these characters talk in ways that that are really ultimately reprehensible.
Listen, it's always icky to say lines like that, and it's always icky to portray our negative history. But I thank God that me and Michael Benjamin Washington really got to talk about that and really get comfortable with one another. And even for him, he's expressed that it was perhaps more tolerable for him to experience it from another person who also happened to be of color. I mean, listen, I hope that never becomes my go-to character. You know what I mean? I hope that that's not what I get typecast as, but I think it's important to preserve history. And I think it's important for us to really honor that and remind ourselves of how ugly it was, because a lot of the themes in our movie still exist. They've just gotten more savvy, whether it's racism, whether it's alcoholism. Right now during this pandemic, there's been a massive uptick, whether it's shame. There's a reason that everyone's out here reading Brene Brown, you know? And so all these themes are still so relevant. They just have morphed.
Even though it's set in 1968 and it's still mostly the original text, it still feels really relevant to today. And can you talk about how you feel it still will talk to an audience of today?
Well, I really feel it does speak to today's audiences. I mean, we see in especially the characters of Larry and Hank being in a relationship and really searching for communication, searching for understanding, searching for a relationship together, even though they might have different ideas of how that's going to look. I mean, that's a very contemporary argument. And I remember when we did the play, a lot of people would be talking about that afterwards, feeling like that felt very modern to have one person who was very traditional and another who was, you know, sort of wanting to be out there, but also wanted a domestic life. So I think those things are really relevant. I also feel like just longing and searching for communication and connection is something we see in all of these characters. And I think that's a really beautiful thing and a very human thing. And although they weren't allowed those opportunities at the time in 1968, we are today. And so we see kind of the impact that had on these guys and why they weren't able to find that thing.
Well, if they're not familiar with the play or the original film, I hope they have a good time. I mean, I really think that's important. The joy, particularly in the first half of this piece, is so infectious and breeds such affection for these characters. And I think that's important. Obviously, a lot has changed since 1968, but with affection, when you are endeared to somebody, you tend to care a lot more about their struggles. And the shape of this piece is a testament to that. But I think that has power out there in the real world. It endears us to one another, and with a marginalized community like the gay or the LGBT community or other communities who are also marginalized, that's how we build bridges.
Well, this is specifically a period piece. This is what it was like to be gay in 1968. And it was not easy. And these guys are often labeled as being self-loathing, but the truth is what they're doing is they're doing the best that they can with a society that is shaming them, that is not letting them be who they authentically are. So audiences today, particularly young audiences, I hope they watch this with perspective and appreciate that we get to live as openly and as freely and as proudly as we do, because men like this from 1968, some of them stood up and said, I'm not going to live like that anymore. I won't live like that anymore. And thereby we get to live the way that we want to live more easily.